So today what I wanted to do was go through the modifications that we've had to the UIIA, and the UIIA is the contract that governs the interchange of the equipment, and there's been a few real positive things over the last few years, and we expect some more as we go along. So feel free to ask questions as we go along, and then we'll have a time for questions at the end as well. There's sort of three things I want to go over: the changes to the repair rules, changes to the per diem rules, and then the dispute resolution panel, which is certainly near and dear to our hearts. That's one of our favorite changes to the UIIA agreement. When it comes to the repairs, one of the more recent changes has been you cannot bill for repairs less than $50. That goes in both directions. We can't bill a steamship line for repairs less than $50, but a lot more importantly, they can't bill us for repairs less than $50. They can put a higher minimum on in their addendum, but it has to go both ways. So they can't say we can't bill them for $100, but they can bill us $50. They have to say the minimum both ways is $50, and certainly they don't want to do that. So for all practical purposes, they put a threshold in for no repairs less than $50. One of the things that we get all the time are, who's responsible for what? And we had an incident today about a driver with tires and things like that. The responsibilities for repairs are listed in the Exhibits B and C. We'll email that to everybody after this meeting, but it defines who's responsible for what. There's no real arguing outside of that. If it's listed there as our responsibility, it's our responsibility. If it's listed there as the equipment provider's responsibility, it's their responsibility. And the nice thing is it's a fairly detailed list, so most items are going to be covered. Here's a big change that's taken place. One of the steamship lines in the past got in a lot of trouble because they were billing the same repairs over and over and over again and never doing the repairs. They get a clean out gate, bad in gate, and so they would go ahead and bill for it, but the repairs were never getting done. One of the big changes is the fact that you must have the repair bill included with the invoice to us, and estimates are not acceptable. You cannot get an estimate from somebody. It has to be an actual repair. Now there is a little exception to that, and sort of like a reasonable facsimile will be okay. If in their invoice to us it includes all the relevant information, a unique control number, the vendor that did the repair, the date of the repair, all the things that were done, you can use that in lieu of attaching the vendor's repair invoice, but it's got to be unique information on it. So you can't use the same control number to bill the same thing twice. So a real nice thing with the change now is where we used to get in the past lots of repairs where we never really thought they were actually doing the repairs. Now the repairs have to get done in order to bill the trucking company. So that's a pretty big change. This is probably the biggest issue that we have, especially with the junky tires we've got on there. And they've had some changes in language, but basically, if the repair of the tires is unrelated to damage, the equipment provider has to pay. And, whoops, my little graphics from PowerPoint didn't come through. If you look at the bottom there, it's based on prevailing, reasonable, and customary repair costs. They can no longer tell us that it's $175 for a tire or $150 for a tire, whatever the amount they make up is. They have to pay for prevailing, reasonable, and customary repair costs. So if a reasonable repair cost for a road repair is going to be $225, they have to pay it. We might have to prove that we've had similar bills in the past, and similarly, if they want to go ahead and pay $150, they would have to show actual repair invoices for $150 on the road. So the nice thing, though, is that they can no longer simply just make up a number and say we're paying $125 or $150, whatever that number is per tire, but as long as it's reasonable and customary, they're required to pay the full amount of the bill. And it works both ways, which is still in our advantage. They can't go ahead and say, a tire repair in a facility is $400. It's got to be reasonable and customary repair cost. So when they charge us for tires, same thing. It's got to be a reasonable rate. They can't make up something high to charge us and then put an arbitrarily low amount to reimburse us. So those are some pretty big changes as well. We haven't had any fights in that one yet, but that's certainly one that I can see us fighting on here in the near future. Whoops. There's some timelines now, which is really good. In the past, we would get repair invoices from a year and 2 years old, and now they put some timelines on the repair invoices. It's an automated gate, it's 120 days, it's a manual gate, 165 days, but if they don't bill within that period of time, they're not allowed to bill us at all. So that's a nice change. There's a lot more, as we go through this, there's a lot more timelines on there than there ever were before. Any questions on the repair side, the changes to the repair side? Great. On to the per diem side. They've got a lot of timelines that are new on the per diem side as well, which is really helpful. You can't bill 5 years later for a container that's sat around for 5 years. They have 18 months from the outgate to invoice, even if the equipment's still on the street. They can't send us, and we've got two we're fighting right now, that are really old bills. We get bills, 3 years later because it was left somewhere, and those are no longer valid. So they have 18 months from the time it's outgated to invoice us. If they don't invoice us within 18 months of the outgate, they can't collect a penny. So that's a pretty big change from the way it was in the past. This is not a change, but they made the wording a little differently. They're required to bill us within 60 days of the in-gate. If they don't bill us, they're not allowed to collect the money. Now, what we had was disputes in the past which were, well, we didn't bill you within 60 days, but you still have to pay us anyway, so we can't shut you out. You're still required to pay. And they clarified the language in there now, so it's you have to bill within 60 days. If you don't bill within 60 days, you're not allowed to collect your money, period. So that's a change that's in our favor as well. Here's where it gets a little sticky on our side, because just like we can hold them accountable, if we don't get a bill within 60 days, our standard process is simply decline it. You guys never see it. We simply write them a letter. We tell them, didn't bill us within 60 days, we're not paying the bill, and that's it. Well, they can do the same to us. If we have a dispute, we have to do it within 30 days of the receipt of the invoice. If we don't do it within 30 days, we lose our right to fight over the invoice. And this is an area where I think we get probably the most pushback from a lot of the agents. People are busy. They don't get a chance to respond back to the per diem group. And what happens then is, it's 60 days later, and they're coming back and they're saying, oh, this bill isn't valid. It doesn't work that way. According to the UIIA, the bill is valid. You cannot dispute it. Even if you showed an in-gate the day after you took it out, even if you could prove 100% that the bill was invalid, you still got to pay it. So we have 30 days to dispute in writing, or it's not valid. So if you have or the bill is valid, you can't dispute it. So if there's any questions on it, you got to get back to the per diem group in a timely manner, and you got to give them the chance to get that written dispute in within 30 days, or we have to pay the bill no matter what. And some are 10 days. If they are 10 days, Doris and them will obviously let you know because they're in a real tight timeline. But typically it's 30, but there are 3 or 4, I think, out there that are 10. But if they do tell you it's 10, you got to get back to them right away, or again, we lose the ability to collect our money